Thank you for tuning in to another episode of The Launchpad. I'm your host, Dave Kluge. As always, joined with two fantastic guests. Today, we've got John Daigle from 4 for 4, and we have Dalton Kates from Mojo. We're going to be getting a look at some of the Week 2 games coming up and talking about some players that boomed and bust in Week 1 and how we should feel about them. Is Saquon Barkley the overall RB1 right now going forward? Is it time to panic and sell Allen Robinson? We're going to talk about Donovan Peoples-Jones popping off and what you should expect from him going forward, and so much more. This is a great episode filled with awesome information and takeaways, but no overreactions to Week 1. Be sure to stick through to the very end of this week's episode of The Launchpad. Knowing what we know now about Saquon Barkley's health, should we have been drafting him a little bit higher? That and so much more on today's episode of The Launchpad. John, go ahead and start us off here. Did we drop the ball a little bit by fading Saquon Barkley into the second round?
I believe so, because if we redrafted today, and I know some best ball teams are, he's a top 5 pick for sure, and arguably RB2A alongside Christian McCaffrey. It's not just his usage either. It's not the results. It's the fact that he also led his own team in routes run more than any other receiver for the Giants. And now we're seeing multiple numbers in their receiving room injured as well. So we have complete faith in Saquon Barkley being an every down workhorse, maybe even leading his own team in targets for as long as he's healthy.
Yeah, and pretty simply put, I think the only concern was his health, and we know that is now completely behind him. Dalton, where would you be ranking Saquon Barkley if we were drafting again right now?
Wow. I almost want to put him first overall, but I'll put him second. Like I'm fully on board. I don't see why they're. I think the Giants' offense in itself would be the reason to fade, but then like you're kind of making the same argument for the Panthers with Christian McCaffrey as well. When you're in that sentiment, so I think like they're literally neck and neck. Like every aspect of Barkley is that he can legitimately like lead the Giants in receiving this year, and also I think it's within the question.
It is fun to try to squeeze him in an RB1, but don't overreact, everyone out there. Jonathan Taylor got 35 touches in a game the Colts were down 20-3. He
did also run a lot of routes too. Jonathan Taylor did have participation. I will say this for Barkley. I also like had him as my RB3 heading into the season. So like for me, it's not like this crazy like jump upwards, which is like my weird way of like humble bragging this. But I fully believe in the talent. Like we saw him when he was fully healthy. Like every single aspect of career when he's been fully healthy. I think like last year we didn't get to see that because like he was still coming off the ACL and he also had that high ankle sprain too. So he's had these weird injuries, but like when he's been healthy, he's been that guy. Like he's been dynamite, like absolute dynamite, and has the potential to put up like a 400 plus PPR point season. Like within like he has that profile. So I don't know if it's too crazy to put him at 1, even though I won't put him there now. I'll put him at 1B.
I mean, we're really splitting hairs if we're talking about Jonathan Taylor, Christian McCaffrey, Saquon Barkley. I think we're all in agreement that is the clear-cut top 3 in one way or another. So let me just throw some hypotheticals out there, talking PPR, because obviously people right now, they might have missed the ball on getting Barkley in their drafts and they want to get him now. So where do you kind of draw the line at wide receivers? If you're trying to give up a wide receiver to get Saquon Barkley, Cooper Kupp, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Stephon Diggs, Devontae Adams, are you giving any of those guys up for Saquon Barkley, or are you still keeping that top 5 ahead of Barkley? Let's say you're a Barkley manager, somebody offers you a wide receiver. Are you taking it or vice versa?
Barkley, in my opinion, still does have although Dalton pointed out correctly, it was fluke injuries. He still has the injury concerns, whereas these top 5 receivers just did what we thought they would. Like nothing was shocking at all. I know there were a lot of victory laps on social media, but hey, the top 5 receivers were top 5 receivers. Congratulations. Took a lot of work to get that right. So no, being involved in their offenses, which we were all still very high on, CeeDee Lamb outside the top 5, that's the one we're concerned about. But again, we weren't really jamming him in there. So no, I'm still sticking with the top 5 guys over Barkley, in my opinion. And also, it probably takes one of them to trade for Barkley now, since you are buying high. And thus, like, I don't want to buy Barkley at this point because it's going to take a lucrative package, and rightfully so.
Yeah.
That's a great way to put it. I mean, you are buying high if you're trying to get him at this point. But anyway, we have a ton to talk about. This is wild. We've been doing the show all off season. We've been talking, trying to make stories out of absolutely nothing. And now we have so much to talk about. I don't even know how we cram it into a 1 hour show. But let's go ahead and get into it. As always, joined with two great guests today on the Launchpad episode 46. Last week, I was with Jeff Bell and Jay Felicio. We were kind of talking about what we learned throughout the offseason, and now we're going to talk about what we learned from week 1, how we apply that into week 2. I'm joined with John Daigle and Dalton Kates, and we are going to look at some week 2 matchups today. First of all, John, over at 4for4, formerly with NBC, now full-time over at 4for4, doing awesome things over there. John, let everyone know where they can find you on social media, what you're working on, where they can find your content.
At not J Daigle, Daigle on Twitter. And that's because trying to be anonymous in 2011 was the worst decision of my career. So although people understand the joke now at not J Daigle, that's where it is. And more importantly, if you're still in the redraft streets, you can use the promo code Daigle10 for access to 4for4 to get 10% off. I write the waiver wire column, and I write it as such. You can go back and read it through Saturday. FFPC, of course, has a second waiver run on Saturday nights. That's also important to see for deeper rosters. So it's all available over there, plus everything I do in DFS.
Yeah, staying busy, putting out great content all the time. On the right side of my screen, you'll see Dalton Kates. Dalton, you were the, I forget if it was the second or third show that I had done, but you were one of the first guests I ever had on this show. And since then, you got a job over with Mojo. You've been blowing up in the space. We've had a chance to meet a few times. Thanks for coming back on the show. I appreciate making the time. Let everyone know where they can find you on social media as well, and then we will get into the rest of the show.
Yeah, so you can find me on socials at Dalton_Kates on Twitter. Right now with Mojo, I'm in charge of the blog content, so I'll be putting out some weekend recaps where I go game by game, recapping all the stuff that matters, things, trends, looking at some of the rookies. How does that affect their workload? Are we going to see more? Just basically finding out like what matters and seeing how different players are being utilized, how they're being utilized in new roles and whatnot. So that's kind of stuff I'm focusing on over there. And then also got some betting subscription that I've done, stealing lines with Ben Gretsch. So I've been doing that. We were lucky enough to hit a 40-1 Saquon Barkley most rushing yards last week. So starting off strong right now.
Yeah, that's a heck of a start to the season. Congrats on that one. Well, let's go ahead and dive right in. We're going to talk about these kind of game by game. I already talked a little bit about Saquon Barkley, so let's stick with that game. Carolina Panthers 0-1, facing off against the New York Giants at 1-0. We already talked about Saquon, blowing our expectations out of the water. Let's talk about the other running back, Christian McCaffrey. Are we getting concerned about Christian McCaffrey at all? I mean, he didn't have a great workload in week 1, and that's kind of what we drafted him for. John, start us off here. How are we feeling about Christian McCaffrey?
I'm not panicking just yet. Now, the Panthers did pass at the 6th highest rate in neutral gain script within one score of their opponent in week 1. But McCaffrey still 82% of the team's backfield touches, only 14 touches. That's the concern here. But also we expect more dump offs in this game in particular. And then I would panic if he doesn't get those dump offs because we know what Wink Martindale is going to do on the other side of the ball. The Giants called the highest blitz rate in the preseason. They called the 3rd highest blitz rate in week 1. And now without Aaron Robinson, their starting boundary quarterback, who they moved to from the slot in week 2, plus Alajari, Kayvon Thibodeau, questionable as well. We expect them to blitz Baker Mayfield again. And although Baker Mayfield only was 31st in completion rate against the blitz in 2021, we expect him to be under heat and thus get rid of the ball quickly in Ben McAdoo's offense. So I would expect more dump offs and a higher target share than just 15% for Christian McCaffrey in week 2.
And this is why, John, you're one of the best out there. Very rarely do I bring somebody on my show and they're talking about defensive injuries and how that's going to affect the game plan. So thank you for that deep analysis there. Love to hear it. Dalton, if you got anything to add to Christian McCaffrey, I'd love to hear it. But if not, I want to talk about Robbie Anderson as well and whether he could be a flex option this week. So Robbie Anderson, Christian McCaffrey, let's hear it.
Yeah, my take on McCaffrey is like I don't really think that matters. Like football is such a weird game on a week-to-week basis. Like a lot of things can happen, and we've just seen Christian McCaffrey be so good for a while. It is something to keep an eye on though with the new quarterback situation in Baker Mayfield. Like he had, and this also correlates to Robbie Anderson and potentially DJ Moore as well as Baker Mayfield. Like there's been a lot of takes about how he's not a good quarterback and whatnot. But one thing he's been really good at is throwing the deep ball, and we saw him connect with Robbie Anderson there. So I think on a week-to-week basis, like we could see these potential splash plays for Robbie Anderson. But DJ Moore is the main guy there, and I'm not too concerned about 1 week not seeing a massive target share. Like we've seen him dominate every single year he's been in the league with massive target share, and he's gonna thrive. I'm curious to see. We've seen Robbie Anderson also be good as well in the NFL. So I'm not too excited about him as a flex just yet, but he's someone that I'm keeping an eye on. Is A, we've seen him be productive, and B, like his skill set does fit Baker Mayfield actually like pretty well. So.
And I think that's what I'm getting excited about. It's just the skill set matchup there. We saw it with Donovan Peoples-Jones, just a big guy that can stretch the field and get those deep balls. And we saw it convert on a big touchdown last week. And 8 targets isn't anything to scoff at either. I mean, last year he was pulling targets as well, 110, and he just didn't really do much with them. So, John, before we start talking a little bit more about this game, do you have anything that you want to add on Robbie Anderson?
He, just like DJ Moore, ran a route on every single drop back for the Panthers. And so the only argument against Robbie Anderson is, does that target share funnel to DJ Moore, or is Robbie Anderson going to consistently lead the team in targets? That's why I'm higher on DJ Moore, because we still expect him to command the targets on this offense. But at least Robbie Anderson's usage was good enough in week 1 to now make him a waiver wire pickup in shallower leagues and someone that we can maybe even flex if we get some more confidence in this offense.
Yeah, and I'm excited to see how this looks. I mean, Baker Mayfield, a lot of question marks about him, but we will see what he can do here. Now let's talk about another guy who just isn't getting utilized the way that we want. I think all 3 of us are big fans of Kadarius Toney, but John, start us off here. What the heck is going on, man? 7 snaps in week 1. What is happening to one of our favorite sleepers here?
No one knows. That's the issue. We have no idea. And then he popped up on the injury report on Thursday, limited with a hamstring injury. So again, we don't know. All we know is that Richie James matched Kenny Golladay for the team high in routes run, and Sterling Shepard we expect to be used over Kadarius Toney moving forward. Sterling Shepard also, remember, he only finished 6 games last year, but he out-targeted Toney in every single game. He's still a good player. And so that's kind of the player I'm monitoring, thinking that Kenny Golladay has maybe retired already, and Richie James isn't the player that can actually outperform Sterling Shepard if Shepard is in fact healthy.
Yeah, and I'm right now in my rankings, I've got Shepard well ahead of Golladay, and I'm not even thinking twice about it. I mean, Golladay just looks toast at this point. Let's just kind of talk about this. Let's imagine, we're not going to go super deep leagues. Obviously, anybody is worth a play when you're playing in 14-team leagues with multiple flex spots. But let's talk your standard 10-team league, 1 flex spot outside of Christian McCaffrey, Saquon Barkley, and DJ Moore. Is there anybody worth starting in this game, Dalton?
I mean, no. I mean, I who are you starting? And you can, but like, are you feeling comfortable starting like Robbie Anderson, or are you comfortable starting Sterling Shepard? I don't know. No. I want to
really had to milk that game as much as possible. I wanted to talk about Saquon Barkley and Christian McCaffrey, but had to get some other storylines. So let's go ahead and move on. Atlanta Falcons at Los Angeles Rams. Much more to talk about in this game. Atlanta lost last week. The Rams also lost last week, but the Rams still go into this game as huge favorites with 10.5 points. So Dalton, start us off here. Darrell Henderson. First of all, is he an RB1? Is that how we should be looking at him? And then Cam Akers, is he droppable? So kind of a 2-part question here. What the heck are we supposed to do with this backfield?
Not dropping Akers just yet. I want to see how the next couple weeks goes with him. The fact that he was the workhorse in the playoffs, especially like after that short Achilles stint, he had like 6-7 extra months to kind of recover from that. And there was some concerns later on in like preseason about him being hurt a little bit. So that could be playing into it. But we've typically seen Sean McVay kind of ride one guy, and it looks like Darrell Henderson is that guy. Henderson saw 84% of the running back touches in the backfield. And I don't know if I'm willing to say RB1, but like certainly like I want to say like the 10 to 15 range when it comes to running backs. And like he should be started everywhere. He is somebody that like if he continues to be the guy and he stays healthy, like he could potentially be a league winner, just like naturally being in that offense. He's going to get utilized a little bit as a receiver to have that safe floor. And like we almost saw like the floor for Darrell Henderson in that role last game, whereas, when they're going to be playing and they're going to be scoring more, he's going to have more touchdown equity. So I'm actually like really excited about Henderson, and I'm not fully out on Akers yet because I still think there's this outside chance in which Akers still is like utilized more than we think. Plus also if anything happens to Henderson, like it's almost a seamless transition to Akers, regardless if we think he's going to be effective or not.
And there's kind of this misconception, I should say, that Sean McVay likes to run a committee approach, and I don't know if that's necessarily it. I mean, he likes to have one guy that he really rides, and that guy just tends to change every few weeks. I mean, 2 years ago it was Malcolm Brown to start the season, then Darrell Henderson stepped in, then Cam Akers, and then last year we saw Sony Michel, Cam Akers, Darrell Henderson, kind of all over the place. So, John, what are you making of this backfield? I mean, are you still same thing, just stashing Cam Akers and hoping that maybe something can happen down the line?
Well, the box scores are wonky because there were so many injuries in the Rams backfield. But going back to last year, there are 13 regular season games, including week 1 this year, where the Rams starter didn't get injured. And in 12 of those 13 games, the starter handled at least 70% of backfield touches. And we saw that from Henderson in week 1 with 78% of the backfield touches. So I am writing Darrell Henderson as a high-end RB2, fringe RB1 for the time being, including in week 2 against the Falcons. But we've seen this before with Henderson as well. He's battled chronic ankle injuries going back to Memphis. Staying healthy is a skill, and that's a skill Henderson doesn't have, and we know that. So I'm still stashing Cam Akers, knowing I can pretty much use him probably in a month or so. It's only a matter of time before Henderson's not available as their starting running back.
Yeah, in the same way that Cam Akers owners got burned week 1, it's only a matter of time before, Darrell Henderson puts up 3 or 4 straight great weeks. You plug him in your lineup, and then one day it comes out and Cam Akers is handling 80% of the touches. That's just how it works in Los Angeles. So you can never really feel too confident about anybody there. Another guy that I'm not feeling too confident about. I mean, I don't know if I've breached panic territory yet, but I am getting there. Allen Robinson just held to almost nothing in this opening week 1 performance. Are we feeling a little bit more confident that he might be able to bounce back against Atlanta? John, start us off here. 1 to 10, how much are you panicking about Allen Robinson?
In week 2, 1. In week 3, I'll be more confident. I don't think there's any chance he bounces back this week in particular. We know how they're going to use him. Even in passing from 3 wide sets at the league's highest rate in week 1 for the Rams, they still stuck Allen Robinson on the boundary for 75% of the snaps. And the boundary, of course, is where A.J. Terrell played 80% of the snaps in week 1. Terrell, of course, who led all cornerbacks last year with the fewest yards per catch, under 7. So overall, no, this is not the game to get back on Allen Robinson. I'll get back on him in week 3.
So let's just throw this out there. If he lays another egg this week, just another terrible performance, you're confident going out and trying to buy low on him at that point, thinking that he can bounce back in week 3?
Especially if the usage stays the same, yes, because he only ran 2 fewer routes than Cooper Kupp, although the box score doesn't really show that. So yes, if he lays another egg, which again is what I'm expecting, I am buying even lower on Monday.
All right, good to hear, because I have kind of been looking at this game. Week 2 for Allen Robinson is like, if he doesn't bounce back, I'm going to freak out. But would you talk me off that ledge a little bit and, add a little more context to the situation there? Now, Dalton, let's talk about Kyle Pitts. I was beating the drum for Kyle Pitts this offseason. You were beating the drum for Kyle Pitts, and he got shut down by Marcus Lattimore. So are we expecting it to be a for sure thing that he bounces back now in week 2 without Lattimore being on him?
I think you have to deal with Jalen Ramsey now, but also the good thing about Pitts is he saw 25% or more of his snaps in line, out wide in the slot. So they're utilizing over the formation a little bit. So he should get some different matchups there. There's a lot of great underlying metrics when it comes to Pitts. He saw 25% of, or he tied the team in targets, 25% of the routes run he was targeted on, which is extremely encouraging. We only turned it into 19 yards. So the thing is, they were also the Falcons had the second lowest win total of any team in Vegas. And then yet again, they were up like 16 points against the Saints. So it was a positive game where they were just running Cordero Patterson. He had like 22 carries. Who would expect Cordero Patterson to 22 carries in the first game? So we're naturally going to see more positive game script for Kyle Pitts and that offense to pass a little more. And the underlying metrics are there. So I'm fully in on Pitts. It's going to happen. I don't know if it's going to be this massive game this week because the matchup could be a little tougher, but overall, Pitts is fine.
Yeah, I feel like it's way too early to panic on Kyle Pitts, especially given his age and, what we're expecting from him. But you talked about Cordero Patterson, and the only people in week 1 that got more touches than Cordero Patterson were Jonathan Taylor and Joe Mixon. Daigle, is this what we're expecting going forward? Is it Cordero Patterson workhorse season again, or was this just kind of fluky? And do we expect, Damian Williams, Tyler Algier to cut into this a little bit, or is it just wheels up for Patterson?
I actually wrote up Patterson for week 1 in my DFS article last week on Friday that everyone can see at 4for4.com. Again, every Friday it'll be out and updated through Sunday. And I think this usage stay the same. Now, 22 carries was a career high for Patterson. Like, we don't expect that per se, but Damian Williams banged up on the injury report. Tyler Algier was inactive for Damian Williams, which also tells you Damian Williams is the back to roster, not Tyler Algier. But also their third string option, Avery Williams, is strictly a special teams guy. I understand he was involved slightly, but only because Damian Williams was banged up. And Damian Williams also played the first 7 snaps, got 2 touches until he was injured on the second drive. So I do think Patterson's touches will devolve, will go down, decrease slightly every single week. I don't expect them to see that amount of workload, but if Williams is banged up, Patterson's gladly a player I'll go right back to this week.
Yeah, completely agree there. Before we dive into the next game now, we do a segment on the show every single week, the Sleeper Start of the Week. You can find the show on sleeper.app. You could also find it directly in their app, swiping all the way over to the right, along with some other great Football Guys shows. And actually, the 4for4 show is up there as well, so you can find that and check out a new podcast to add into the rotation. But let's go ahead and talk about that real quickly here.
It's time for the Sleeper Start of the Week, powered by Sleeper.
Dalton, give us your sleeper of the week.
All right, this is a little out there to start him already, but I think Donovan Peoples-Jones is somebody that's actually like really interesting. And I don't know why I'm so excited about a guy who just in one game had a really good game, but there's a lot of good metrics there that actually show that he is in a new role. And the same way we saw Mike Williams last year go from like this high 8-dot deep threat to like being this more possession guy. Like he was last year at a 15.6 average depth of target, year before 17.6, 8.5 average depth of target, being utilized in the short intermediate routes of the field. Also 37% of the target share there with the Browns. So like those are like extremely exciting things for, especially for a guy who is only 23 years old, was an elite athlete. Like he was a day 3 wide receiver, and sometimes it takes those guys a couple of years to start to get into their own. He was efficient on a yards per target basis in the first couple years in the league. So I'm really curious to see if this could be potential signal. I don't know. It could be complete variance for like a week 1 thing. But again, like he's somebody that is very interesting if he is in a new role that, maybe like a sneaky breakout guy this year.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously concerns with him hauling in passes from Jacoby Brissett, but you got to be excited about that. And really, anyone that was paying attention last year, I mean, he had some great games. And like you said, a lot of really exciting measurables. What jumps out for me is the 100th percentile burst score. I mean, this guy is just an absolute freak athlete. He can jump out of the gym. And we saw a much more diverse route tree in week 1. Like I said, the concern is obviously Jacoby Brissett, but I am with you. On leagues that I hadn't already drafted Donovan Peoples-Jones, I was trying to pick him up this week. It wouldn't surprise me given Amari Cooper's age and what just seems to be like a lack of excitement about playing football. It wouldn't shock me one bit if DPJ could take over as the wide receiver 1 in Cleveland this year. So love that call out, and I'm firing him up in a few leagues myself. But same question over to you, John. Who is your sleeper for this week?
I somewhat cheated, but I say Russell Wilson because I would start him over Tom Brady, over Joe Burrow, and over a number of other low-end QB1s. After talking up the Broncos, their pace of play throughout the offseason, Denver only averaged the 4th most seconds between plays in week 1. They were a slow and methodical offense, but the 16 points in the box score doesn't show what they actually accomplished. They still averaged 6.3 yards per play, 45 yards per drive, and reached the red zone on 50% of their possessions. They just didn't show it in the box score since they had those 2 goal line fumbles, oddly enough, on 2 consecutive possessions. So overall, I am significantly higher on the Broncos passing attack going into week 2 than most people. And I don't think, maybe it's proven to not be true, but I don't think this is a team that's going to target running backs at the highest rate again, as they did in week 1. I think we see more funneled to Jerry Jeudy and Cortland Sutton, and that's the way I'm attacking it.
Yeah. And again, we play in these deep leagues with a bunch of analysts with 50 bench spots, but there are a lot of leagues out there where people saw Russell Wilson's week 1 performance and dropped him and tried to pivot to, Carson Wentz or something like that. Not that we would advise that whatsoever, but if you're in one of these shallower leagues, go check your waiver wire because you might be able to snag Russell Wilson right now, who has top 5 quarterback upside for the rest of the season. But anyway, let's go ahead and jump back into some games here, talking about the Seattle Seahawks at the San Francisco 49ers. Seahawks with that wild win on Monday night, and San Francisco with a very tough loss. underneath Lake Michigan, basically. But let's talk a little bit about this. Elijah Mitchell is going to be missing the next few months here. So what are we expecting from Jeff Wilson Jr.? John, start us off here. Are you firing up with confidence, or is Jordan Mason a guy that you're thinking about possibly starting?
I'm firing up Jeff Wilson with confidence as an RB2. Jordan Mason was active in week 1, and yet once Elijah Mitchell was injured, Wilson handled all 11 running back touches for the rest of the game. I don't think anyone else will be involved as long as Wilson is healthy. But the issue is, remember, Elijah Mitchell handled 18 carries per game in the 12 games he finished last year when he wasn't injured. I don't think it can be cited as that same workload for Wilson, since we now have Trey Lance instead of Jimmy Garoppolo. It's an entirely different offense. Trey Lance has recorded 12, and 13 carries in his 3 starts for the 49ers. Thus, it's more of a log jam backfield than we think, since there are less carries to go around. Having said that, we still expect 14 plus and every carry inside the 10-yard line for Wilson, and that's the way I'll handle it.
Yeah, completely agree there. And like you said, I mean, he's gotten 8 starts where he hasn't been injured throughout his career. And he averages 19 carries per game in those games and nearly 100 yards. So Jeff Wilson Jr., I think you got to fire him up with confidence. Now, you guys knew coming on this show that I was going to have to slip a little bit of anti-Trey Lance propaganda in here. And here it is, Dalton. Let's imagine that somehow the San Francisco 49ers lose this game. Is there any chance that Trey Lance gets benched heading into week 3?
0%.
0%
chance. If it were to happen, it's not going to happen this soon. Like, every indication this offseason has been that Trey Lance is the guy. And my personal belief, based on reading some of the teams, is that like there was legitimate like no trade partners that wanted to pay that salary for Garoppolo. So I think right now we're in a scenario in which they bring him back as a high-end backup with a tradable salary. There's a no trade clause. Now Jimmy Garoppolo can essentially choose his own team if he were to get traded to. So I think that's potentially the scenario at play, where like they understand that Trey Lance is a project, and I don't think they're looking for him to like be this superstar right out of the gates. Like everything, I was listening to Adam Schefter like this offseason, and they're extremely excited about Trey Lance and his progress there when it comes to the Niners. But again, they understood that this is a guy who had like 300 and something pass attempts like in college. Like they weren't expecting him to just suddenly be the superstar, and they knew there was going to be ups and downs. And that's why they've game planned a lot of their plays to be a much more rush heavy team. So again, like I find it very hard to believe, unless he plays atrociously, that like at the end of the year, maybe like mid to end of the year, like Garoppolo. But I think it's very unlikely.
Now
I think it's unlikely.
Is one of my spicier takes, and I see you mean mugging me, John. So go ahead, call me an idiot.
No,
if you got,
no. I think it's unlikely for week 3, but also fantasy players love Trey Lance more than Kyle Shanahan. The leash is much shorter than we perceive. That's why I'm excited to see the play calling this week, because I think it's going to tell us a whole lot about what they think about Trey Lance and this offense overall.
Yeah, and if they're putting the ball in his hand and letting him make plays, I think that's a big vote of confidence. But if they really kind of dumb the offense down and they just have him handing it off and running the ball, then I might get a little bit concerned. So I'm with you. I'm excited to see what the play calling looks like this week.
The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing Trey Lance played bad because of the monsoon, when Justin Fields looked just fine. Justin Fields was fine in a monsoon, and yet everyone's only making excuses for Trey Lance.
Did he look fine, though? I mean, trust me, I love Justin Fields. I'm a Bears fan, but outside of that like busted play touchdown, he really didn't do much. He had that one really nice throw. I will say the throw.
He does 2 things. He extends plays, and he had a 20 A-dot for a reason. He extends plays and launches it deep. That's what he does, and Trey Lance couldn't even do that.
Yeah, no, I'm absolutely excited. I mean, what we saw from Justin Fields, and also just like that's the first time as a Bears fan that I've been like excited about a game. Like it's a game we're gonna remember for a long time.
Aaron Rodgers has come to settle that excitement. So
trust me,
down just a little bit.
No, I know it's over, but I'm gonna relish in it while I can for this week at least. Now let's look on the other side of the ball with this Seahawks and 49ers game. DK Metcalf saw 7 targets, which is good, but 36 scoreless yards. And that's kind of what we may have expected with a Geno Smith-led offense. The volume's going to be there. He wants to get the ball to his best playmaker, but we're not going to be seeing these huge chunk plays with Russell Wilson. Dalton, are you concerned at all about DK Metcalf's usage and in his results, or are we still just firing him up as a wide receiver too?
I think you do have to fire him up in your lineups. I would say more as like a low-end wide receiver too. Geno Smith did not throw the ball deep at all. Like they were just basically dinking and dunking their entire way there. He had a sub-6 A-dot, which is like somewhat concerning. And that's why I think everyone was so excited about Geno, because I saw this completion percentage. It was like, dude, the guy's like freaking 14 straight completions that are like, 3-5 yards down the field. And DK Metcalf did see a good like target per route run, which was encouraging. But again, like none of that was really like down the field in which he thrives in. So Again, it's a small sample. It's one game, but also like it was very interesting to see them be like extremely pass heavy for some reason with in a Pete Carroll system. So
I think that was just him kind of,
whether that's going to sustain again, especially with Ken Walker coming back. Like, again, like it was, again, I really like don't have a full opinion on, because I'm trying to find out how much of that was noise, how much of that was just one game sample, and how much of that actually like is Geno like not throwing the ball downfield. So
unlike what I said about the Broncos and not believing they are going to lead the league in running back target share, the issue is that I can see the Seahawks leading the league in tight end target share like they did in week 1. Also, DK Metcalf, they just turned him into Jamison Crowder. He had a 4.5 depth of target.
Right.
Like, they just ran him on slants underneath and said, good luck, get open after this. And so I am absolutely concerned. Dalton hit it on the head, though. Like, not a wide receiver 2, more like a wide receiver 3 you're starting for as athletic profile. And let's adjust if his 25% target share decreases as we move along for the season.
Yeah, I'm definitely getting a little bit concerned. He was a guy where I think you guys might have seen it. I tweeted it out a few weeks ago, and I said, I don't really have a strong case on DK Metcalf, besides the fact that we shouldn't be letting a 23-year-old guy who runs a 4.3 slip into the 5th round. But now we're seeing it. I mean, this is a pretty gross offense, and even though they, irked out a win, it came with some goal line fumbles, and it wasn't pretty, and I don't know if we're going to be seeing them doing a lot for the rest of the season. So I'm a little bit concerned about DK Metcalf, but not totally panicking yet. But another guy I want to talk about on Seattle is Rashad Penny. So let's just put on our imagination hats and pretend that we're getting 17 healthy games of Rashad Penny. John, if he is healthy for a full 17 games, where should we expect Rashad Penny to finish? Because he looked good last week.
I also thought the usage was extremely encouraging. 93% of the team's backfield touches, including 100% of their running back targets, and ran more routes than Travis Homer. Travis Homer was still the third down and distance option, but Penny was clearly the guy they just jammed concerted touches to, whether it be carries or catches. And so even though Ken Walker is returning this week, I truly think, as beat writers told us for the last month leading up to the season, like, this is Rashad Penny's backfield until proven otherwise. And Penny didn't show us anything to prove otherwise in week 1. So I agree. I'm comfortable with Penny as a RB2, maybe even fringe RB1 if he can show some success behind what was a poor Seattle offensive line in week 1.
Yeah, and again, like so many other people we've talked about so far in the show, the only concern with him was his health. But when he's fully healthy and on the field, he looks like one of the most dynamic running backs. Yeah, he's extremely good. Now let's move on to another game, and I want to talk about the Bengals and the Cowboys. Obviously, a lot of storylines to talk about here, but let's start with the Bengals and Dalton. T. Higgins right now, he is still in concussion protocol, and we know how these things go. Sometimes people are cleared in 24 hours. Sometimes they linger for weeks. So if he is unable to clear concussion protocol, how high are you ranking Tyler Boyd this week? Are we firing him up as a sure thing wide receiver 2?
Yeah, I'd say low in wide receiver 2. I think you have to. I mean, Tyler Boyd is one of those like very like there's only a couple wide receivers who are like handcuff wide receivers where we've seen him be productive every year prior to like Higgins and Chase being there, and then suddenly he just like kind of just gets alphaed out by those guys just because they're that much better. But Tyler Boyd's like still a good wide receiver. He's still going to find a way to get targets there in a scenario in which Higgins is out. I'm definitely comfortable starting him in that offense. I'm like legitimately like, I was so in on the Bengals here because I was confident that based off of last year's success at the end of the year, when they became a little more pass heavy, that they would just lean into that a little more. And then like Zach Taylor just proves he's an actual donkey and just continues to run the ball to Joe Mixon every single time, even though you have like 2 superstar wide receivers there. And then Jamar Chase and Burrow bail you out again to get you into overtime, and then you lose. So yeah, I think that's my biggest concern right now with that passing offense is Zach Taylor.
It's kind of incredible that they have Zach Taylor. They're just making one terrible decision after another, and still, like, in spite of Zach Taylor, made it to a Super Bowl last year, and now they're kind of stuck with him for a few years. Like, he bought himself some time, and they can't get rid of him if they want to now. Daigle, do you have anything to add about Tyler Boyd? Because I think he is one of the most intriguing plays this week if T. Higgins is unable to suit up.
We have evidence that he had a 28% target share in the first month of the season last year, whenever T. Higgins opened the year banged up. So I'm just leaning on that and saying, yeah, he's a low-end wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3. I don't really have confidence in this total or game script. Zach Taylor is the coach that could dunce this up, but just like the Bucs did, like, the Bengals would be wise to lean on their improved offensive line against the Cowboys pass rush and instead run the ball heavily with Joe Mixon.
And that's exactly what I want to talk about next. I mean, Joe Mixon, he has been an on-the-ground beast for the last few seasons, but in week one, we saw a career-high 9 targets. And it seems like we always get this taste and this idea, like this hope every single offseason. Like maybe this is the year that Joe Mixon finally gets involved in the passing game. We saw it in week one. It's 1 week. You don't want to read too much into it. But John, is this the start of a trend? Are we finally going to see 3 down back Joe Mixon?
I don't know, but we do know that it's 7 consecutive games now where he's dating back to last year, including the postseason, when he's run a route on over half of Joe Burrow's dropbacks. He's averaged 7 targets in that 7-game span and also a 17% target share. And more importantly, you couple that passing game usage, which is great, but also the fact that he still handled 27 of 28 running back carries in week one. So it's elite usage right now for Joe Mixon. And again, whether the passing game usage sticks throughout the regular season, that's what we're really trying to figure out. But I expect it to in week 2. I think it's a heavy mixing game.
Daigle, I'm just going to tell you, I think I'm stealing that stat, and I will be sure to credit you. I'm in two other shows this evening, and I think I'm going to be dropping that in both of them if Joe Mixon comes up. That is that's some fire right there. Dalton, same question to you though. I mean, is this what we're looking at now? Is it going to be 80 targets and 250 carries? Is that kind of what we should just be penciling Joe Mixon in for?
I don't know if I'm going to go that far, but I do think like it's extremely encouraging to kind of see that. The Steelers historically against, Burrow, they've kind of let them get a lot of underneath stuff. And that's one of the things that came into play also with Higgins being out. Like, I think Higgins coming back will definitely squeeze that a little bit, but Mixon's for sure going to be involved as I think it was also encouraging not to see like Chris Evans really see much work at all. I think that's probably another thing that's also encouraging for Mixon as well. So, he's definitely like a locked in RB1, but he's probably going to get a lot of touches, especially on the ground because Zach Taylor loves that. But I think overall it's extremely encouraging for Mixon.
Yeah. Now let's talk about CeeDee Lamb. Whether it was warranted or not, CeeDee Lamb fetched a second-round price tag this offseason. So a lot of people really paid up to get CeeDee Lamb, and now we're looking at concerns with Cooper Rush being the quarterback. CeeDee Lamb's the one guy that you're probably starting, the one pass catcher on Dallas. But Dalton, is there anybody else that you are confident starting? Any other pass catchers on Dallas, or is CeeDee Lamb the only guy?
I think Dalton Schultz out of necessity, because if you drafted Dalton Schultz, like really what other tight end are you going to be able to plug in and play? Maybe if you got like a Gerald
off the waiver wire,
or you feel comfortable starting. Like that's the thing. What comes with Schultz is he's definitely downgraded a bit, but I don't think he's also downgraded enough to where he's suddenly in that range where you're starting some of these very fringe tight ends over him. So I think he is also startable, but I don't feel good about it.
Yeah, and this is a game script that probably is going to force Dallas's hand into throwing a lot. But again, these are coming from Cooper Rush. So, John, same question to you. Outside of CeeDee Lamb, do you have confidence in any pass catchers on Dallas?
Dalton Schultz is a fine, high reception floor guy. Otherwise, zero confidence in anyone. I've lost confidence in CeeDee Lamb. Everyone cites Cooper Rush's start against the Vikings last year as his resume when he had over 300 yards and multiple touchdowns. But this is a totally different offense this year. He's playing behind a third-string left guard, a developmental rookie left tackle. That's why he stepped in and was under pressure on 35% of his dropbacks and completed 53% of his passes, because he looks up, unlike last year against Minnesota when he saw Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, and Michael Gallup. He looks up now and sees CeeDee Lamb, Dennis Houston, and Noah Brown. It's a disaster. So no, I think this is a college offense. I don't want any part of it.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more with you on that. Now let's talk about Tony Pollard, the last guy I want to talk about in this game. I mean, it feels like we got duped again. This is like the third straight offseason where they say Tony Pollard's going to be playing in the slot. He's going to be involved in the passing game. And now even with all of these other guys starting, these other wide receivers, he's not getting any usage as a pass catcher. Finished the game with just 2 targets. So, John, what are we doing with Tony Pollard? Is he somebody that we can play as a flex, or is he just a pure handcuff at this point?
I think my argument throughout the offseason was that if you flex Tony Pollard, your fantasy team sucks. That's what it's come down to the whole time. He's a great contingency option, but you absolutely cannot flex him. Now he's played 16 games with Ezekiel Elliott dating back to last year, and he's averaged 10.5 touches per game. That's not a player you want, especially in this offense, in your lineup. So no, you can hold him. The issue also for those holding Pollard who drafted him in the 7th, 8th round is that Ezekiel Elliott also looked good. I also don't expect this offense with Cooper Rush and all the players surrounding him this year that I mentioned to be a high-scoring team anymore. They didn't reach the Bucs' 30-yard line in week 1. I expect that to continue. Like, this team is a disaster. So no, I just don't want any part of it.
Completely with you there. Now, Dalton, we're going to switch gears and we are going to talk about the last game that I want to cover today. The Arizona Cardinals, Las Vegas Raiders. Both of these guys had tough losses in week 1. But the one thing that really jumped out to me was Davante Adams with a 49% target share. I mean, just rendered every single other player on the Raiders essentially useless, pulling 49% of the targets. So now we already talked about it to open up the show. The big 5. We got Jefferson, Kupp, Diggs, Chase, and Davante Adams. Are we putting Davante Adams atop that list? I mean, does it even really matter at this point? All these guys are so good, but I mean, how high are we ranking Adams going forward?
I mean, I think you obviously have to be extremely excited about it. He's had that chemistry with Carr just going back to college. So I think that kind of helped that seamless transition. Seeing that target share was extremely impressive, but I don't know if I'm ready to put him there. Like, I still think Jefferson's probably the guy in Kupp I'd probably put ahead of him. But like, if somebody said they had Adams first, like, I mean, I'm not going to argue against that. I think they're all like extremely elite, like wide receiver ones.
Yeah, you can throw all these guys and shake them up. You can make a strong argument for anybody to be wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 5, as far as I'm concerned. And yeah, I mean, anybody that took advantage of getting those guys in the first round is feeling pretty smug after week 1. But John, what I want to talk about is how does Adams dominating snaps and dominating targets affect Darren Waller and Hunter Renfrow? I mean, Renfrow hardly did anything last week. Waller didn't have much of a game either. Is this just going to be the Davante Adams show? What are we doing with Renfrow and Waller going forward?
I think the Raiders can do whatever the hell they want in this game, honestly. We are still playing Darren Waller over Renfrow. Remember, Renfrow averaged 5.5 fewer fantasy points per game in the full games Waller played last year. Like, that's why in best ball we were saying you can't draft both. You draft one or the other as a hedge against one or the other because they don't get there together. But we also know the Cardinals not only led the league in touchdowns allowed to slot receivers last year, they again came out against the Chiefs and led the league in receiving yards to slot receivers. So I actually pick Renfrow in this game. Either way, Davante Adams gets his. The Raiders won't have any issue scoring.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel. This is going to be a shootout. I'm really excited for this. And this entire game is just loaded top to bottom with guys that you can start very confidently in fantasy football. One guy that I'm not so confident about, though, is one of my favorite targets this offseason, Kyler Murray. I mean, he just flat out stunk in week 1. I don't know how else to put it. He looked terrible. The whole offense was kind of sputtering a little bit. So, Dalton, we're going back to this 1 to 10 panic scale when I was talking about Allen Robinson a little bit earlier. How much are we panicking about Kyler Murray on a scale of 1 to 10? And I know you're an Arizona guy, so try not to be too biased.
I'm not worried. I'm not worried too much. Like, I would say like a 3 on a scale of 1 to 10. The thing is, like, these games happen. Like, it's the NFL. There's going to be blowouts. There's going to be bad games. But again, like, Marquise Brown had some good underlying metrics that should be there. Like, DeAndre Hopkins is going to be back at some point. Like, Rondale Moore's probably going to come back at some point. Like, there's a lot of things that you can legitimately look at and be like, this is why it was bad. Whereas there's a lot of positive indicators in the futures for why Kyler Murray might be better. So maybe short term, sure, like, I can get behind that argument. But again, like, it's one game. I'm not going to overreact to a very bad one game.
Completely agree. It's not Murray's fault, but this game, Dave, you said a shootout. I kind of hope that doesn't happen because I'm betting against it in DFS because the Raiders only rushed 4 defenders on half their defensive snaps in week 1 and yet still recorded the 4th highest pressure rate in the league against a Chargers offensive line we consider to be significantly stronger than Arizona's. At least last year, Murray dumped it off for the 7th highest completion rate under pressure. But in week 1, with an injured Zach Ertz, Marquise Brown streaking downfield, and the offense being built around Greg Dortch, like, he was horrible. 4 of 13 for 2 yards per attempt under pressure. Just can't do anything. And it's not his fault. The talent isn't here in this offense. And again, the talent won't be there in this offense this week. So I worry about Kyler Murray short term, but not long term.
So what I'm hearing is smash the under at 51.5. That's what you're telling me?
Well, the Raiders may score 51 points.
That's a very good point. All right, the last guy that we're going to talk about in this matchup and the last guy for the show is James Conner. James Conner was a guy that I kind of waffled back and forth on all season. Like, I get really excited about him, and then I'm like, he's kind of in that fringe running back dead zone area. Never really was able to solidify a strong take on James Conner, but last week we saw just 10 carries on the day. So what are we expecting from him going forward? Is he going to get that running back usage that we want to see, or is this going to be a frustrating committee with Benjamin and maybe Darrell Williams getting in the mix? John, talk me through James Conner.
It depends if the Cardinals are competitive. That's all it comes down to, because Eno Benjamin didn't touch the ball until the second drive of the third quarter after the Chiefs scored and built a 30-7 lead. To that point, every touch was James Conner. All 6 of his targets came in the first half. So again, the argument in the third round of James Conner wasn't the touchdown regression. It's that in 5 starts without Chase Edmonds last year, he averaged 20.5 touches and 5.5 targets. It's the same thing this year. He is an every touch running back for the Cardinals offense. The issue is the Cardinals offense may not be able to carry their weight for the second straight week. That's all we're worried about. If it gets out of hand, then James Conner will come off the field. If it's within even 14 points, James Conner will play every snap.
So we're not looking at Eno Benjamin in the Chase Edmonds role from last year. This is just James Conner maintaining the role that he had solidified last season.
It was only 1 week, so I shouldn't say absolutely not. But for 1 week, no. Benjamin wasn't an issue whatsoever. Again, didn't touch the ball to the second half when they were down by 23 points. Have to do quick math in my head.
All right, before we sign off here, same to you, Dalton. How are you feeling about James Conner? I mean, are you agreeing with everything John said, that we should just be looking at this guy's workhorse going forward?
Yeah, John hit the nail on the head there. It's going to come down to how good this offense is for James Conner. Like, the reason why we didn't see a lot of touches was they were getting absolutely smoked. And we saw Eno Benjamin come in after the fact. Like, Eno Benjamin spelled in a little bit, but it's nothing to be concerned about whatsoever. James Conner is the clear workhorse there. He's going to get a majority of the touches there. And also, I think it was also encouraging too to not see like any other running back involved too. Like, Eno Benjamin was the only guy afterwards. So like, we know like James Conner doesn't have to worry about a third guy being spelled either. It's literally him in the pecking order, and then Eno Benjamin's the clear backup. And yeah, I mean, Conner.
Well, you can kind of bump both of those guys up in your rest of season rankings. We know that Darrell Williams isn't going to be the guy anymore. He's not going to have any sort. So it's the James Conner show. And if something happens to James Conner, then it's going to be the Eno Benjamin show. That's kind of how we're looking at this backfield.
Which is why we laid out the context, because some are overreacting, thinking, Benjamin has a role. He doesn't have a role, but he is the contingency player to definitely stash.
100%.
And it's the same exact thing we saw with the Chiefs, where people are saying, you got to go out and get Isaiah Pacheco because he saw some touches. He saw his touches in the second half when the game was already out of contention. So yeah, there's always a lot more context that you cannot get from the box score. But fellas, I know this is a busy time of year, so I really appreciate both of you making time right now. Before we sign off here, one more time, let everyone know where they can find you on social media. Dalton, go ahead and start us off here.
Yeah, you can find me at Dalton_Kates on Twitter. You can find me there. Find my stuff on mojo.com, putting out the blog out there. And then Stealing Lines for some betting picks, stealinglines.substack.com for that.
Yeah, be sure to check that out. And John, same to you. Let everyone know where they can find you and what you are going to be working on this season.
At Not J Daigle on Twitter, but more importantly, 4for4.com. Use the promo code Daigle10 for 10% off a sub. And I will also hang around the Discord there for waiver Q&As after the waiver wire column is written, plus all my DFS content and betting content throughout the weekend.
Yeah, I just got in that 4for4 Discord a couple weeks ago, and you guys hustle.
I may be answering your questions. Great. I mean, you could literally just text me, but sure, I'll answer your questions, whatever.
Well, guys, again, really appreciate the time. You can find me on Twitter at Dave Kluge. That's Kluge. If you have not already, be sure to subscribe at youtube.com/footballguys. So check out these full-length shows that we're doing, as well as all of our short videos. And then down in the YouTube description below us, you can find a link to download Sleeper at sleeper.app. Be sure to check that out. The best fantasy platform out there. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you guys next week. Thank you for tuning in. If you have not already, be sure to subscribe to the YouTube page. That's youtube.com/footballguys, where you can find all of our content. Hit the like button below if you like this video, and drop a reply down below if you have anything to add. Thank you so much for checking out this week's episode of The Launchpad, and I will see you next week.